It started with a late-night scroll on Reddit, the kind of endless browsing you do when you're too tired to do anything productive but not tired enough to sleep. I had just gotten home from a long shift at the warehouse and was sprawled out on the couch, the rain tapping lightly against the window. My usual subreddits weren't holding my attention, so I ventured into the rabbit hole of r/no-sleep. I've always loved creepy stories. There's something comforting about reading them in the safety of your own home, knowing they're just that, stories. Or at least, that's what I told myself. One post caught my eye, buried under a dozen others with flashy titles. This one was simple, unassuming: whatever you do, don't reply to this thread. The username was a jumble of letters and numbers, and the upvotes were oddly low for a post on a subreddit like this. It was the kind of thing you'd skip past without a second thought, but for some reason, I clicked it. The post was short. This is not a story. This is a warning. If you reply to this thread, it will know you. It will see you. It will come for you. You won't be able to stop it. I'm already too late. Don't make the same mistake. I stared at the screen, feeling the corners of my mouth twitch into a smirk. Classic Reddit creepypasta, I thought. The kind of thing meant to spook you into upvoting. But there was something about the wording that stuck with me: it will know you. Not find you, not hurt you. Know you. Like it could reach inside and pull out all the things you'd rather keep buried. Against my better judgment, I scrolled to the comments. There weren't many, just a few replies from other users. Nice try, OP, 2 out of 10. Creepy. But not original. So what happens if I reply? Bring it on. The last one caught my attention. The user who'd posted it, Ghostboy89, had their comment grayed out. I clicked their profile out of curiosity, but it was blank, like the account had been deleted. Strange, but not unheard of. People delete accounts all the time, especially if they get trolled or embarrassed. But when I went back to the thread, the comment was gone. Completely vanished. Not even a deleted marker. It was like it had never been there in the first place. That should have been my cue to close the app and go to bed, but I didn't. Something about the whole thing felt unfinished, like an itch I couldn't scratch. Without thinking, I typed a reply of my own. Cool story, OP. What happens now? I hit post and immediately regretted it. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I stared at the screen, waiting for, I don't know, something. Nothing happened. No replies, no weird glitches. Just silence. I chuckled nervously, shaking my head. Get a grip, I muttered, tossing my phone onto the coffee table. It was just a dumb thread, nothing more. The rain outside picked up, hammering against the windows. I glanced at the clock, 2:17 a.m. time to call it a night. I got up, stretched, and headed to the kitchen to grab a glass of water. That's when I noticed the sound. It was faint, barely audible over the rain. A soft, rhythmic tapping, like fingers drumming against glass. I froze, my grip tightening on the glass. The sound was coming from the living room window. Slowly, I turned toward it. The curtains were drawn, but I could see the outline of something standing just outside, tall and unmoving. My heart slammed against my ribs as I crept closer, each step heavier than the last. When I reached the window, I hesitated. The tapping had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. I held my breath and pulled the curtain back in one swift motion. The window was empty. Just rain streaking down the glass and the faint glow of the streetlight outside. I let out a shaky laugh, feeling ridiculous for getting so worked up. But as I turned away, my eyes caught something on the glass. A handprint. It was faint, like someone had pressed their hand against the window and then wiped it away. But the size was all wrong. The fingers were too long, the palm too narrow, like something that wasn't quite human had left it there. I backed away, my chest tightening. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. I grabbed my phone, desperate for some kind of distraction, but when I unlocked the screen, the Reddit app was already open. My reply was still there, but now it had a single response. It knows you now. The username wasn't OP's. It wasn't anything, just a blank space where the name should have been. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling, and then the phone buzzed. A new message. It was from an unknown number, no caller ID. Just a single text. Look again. The tapping started up again, louder this time, and coming from every window in the house. The tapping echoed through the house, relentless and rhythmic, like it was following a pattern only it understood. It wasn't just the living room window anymore, it was the kitchen, the bathroom, the tiny window above the sink in the hallway. Each tap was deliberate, like a knock, like it was waiting for me to answer. I didn't dare move. My phone buzzed in my hand again, but I couldn't bring myself to look at it. My breathing was shallow, my chest tightening as I stood frozen in the middle of the living room. The tapping stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse, thick and suffocating. I glanced at the windows, half expecting to see something staring back at me, but they were empty. Still, the sense of being watched was overwhelming. It was like whatever this thing was, it wasn't just outside anymore. It was everywhere. My phone buzzed again, jerking me out of my paralysis. The screen lit up with another message from the same unknown number. Let me in. I dropped the phone, my heart pounding. It clattered onto the hardwood floor, the screen flickering as it landed. The lights in the living room dimmed, flickering faintly, and I swore I could hear something, breathing. Slow, deliberate, and far too close. The living room door creaked open. I spun around, my stomach lurching. The door to the hallway, the one I'd locked before going to bed, was now ajar. The darkness beyond it seemed deeper, like the hallway wasn't just a hallway anymore but a void, an absence of everything that should have been there. I grabbed a fireplace poker from the corner of the room, my hand shaking as I held it in front of me. Who's there? I demanded, my voice cracking. I'm armed. I'll call the cops. The breathing stopped. The house went silent again, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Then, from the darkness of the hallway, came a voice. You invited me. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The words crawled under my skin, spoken in a tone that didn't sound entirely human. There was no anger in it, no malice, just a cold, empty certainty. It wasn't asking for permission. It was stating a fact. I took a step back, my legs trembling. The fireplace poker felt useless in my hands, like a child's toy against whatever this thing was. The darkness in the hallway shifted, and a shape began to emerge, a tall, thin figure, its outline barely visible in the dim light. The figure stepped into the living room, and I wished I hadn't seen it. Its body was wrong, all sharp angles and unnatural proportions, like it had been pieced together from parts that didn't quite fit. Its face, or what should have been its face, was a smooth, featureless void, save for a single, too-wide grin that stretched across where its mouth should have been. I stumbled back, tripping over the edge of the couch. The fireplace poker clattered to the floor as I scrambled to get away. The thing tilted its head, the grin widening, and then it spoke again. You shouldn't have answered. I bolted for the front door, my heart racing. The rain was still coming down in torrents outside, but I didn't care. I just needed to get out. My hands fumbled with the lock, the metal cold and slick under my fingers. Behind me, the sound of tapping started again. This time, it wasn't on the windows. It was on the walls, the floor, the ceiling. The entire house seemed alive with the sound, closing in on me, drowning out my panicked breaths. The door finally gave way, and I stumbled out onto the porch. The rain hit me like a wave, cold and unforgiving, but I didn't stop. I ran down the driveway, my bare feet splashing through puddles, and didn't look back until I reached the street. The house was dark. The windows were empty. The tapping had stopped. For a moment, I thought it was over. That whatever had happened, I'd escaped. But then my phone buzzed again, still clutched tightly in my hand. I didn't want to look. I knew I shouldn't. But I couldn't help myself. The message was simple. You can't run. I looked up, and there it was. Standing in the middle of the street, illuminated by the faint glow of the streetlights. Its grin was wider now, impossibly wide, and its empty face seemed to ripple, like it was trying to form features that wouldn't stay. It raised a hand, long and spindly, and pointed at me. The streetlights flickered out. I turned and ran, the rain blinding me as I stumbled through the darkness. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. The sound of tapping followed me, relentless, like it was inside my head now. It didn't matter how far I ran, it was always just behind me. When I finally collapsed, drenched and shivering, I was in a part of town I didn't recognize. The houses were unfamiliar, the streets too quiet. I sank to my knees, gasping for breath, and looked around desperately for any sign of help. That's when I saw the light. It was faint, coming from a house at the end of the street. The curtains were drawn, but the glow of a TV flickered through the windows. I forced myself to my feet, stumbling toward it, praying that someone, anyone, was home. I reached the porch and pounded on the door, my voice hoarse. Please. Help me. The door creaked open on its own. Inside, the living room was empty, save for a single chair facing the TV. The screen was static, the sound hissing faintly. I stepped inside, my wet clothes clinging to my skin, and looked around. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of mildew. Then the static on the TV shifted. The screen went dark, and a single sentence appeared in glowing white letters. You let it in. The tapping started again, this time directly behind me. It was one of those nights where sleep wasn't an option. My insomnia had kicked in hard, so I sat in my dimly lit living room, scrolling Reddit on my phone. The rain outside was relentless, a constant drumbeat against the windows, but it added to the cozy vibe. I was deep diving into threads on r/glitch_in_the_matrix, one of my guilty pleasures. Stories about strange coincidences and impossible events were fascinating to me, creepy, sure, but not exactly terrifying. That's when I saw the post. The title was simple, Does anyone else remember the woman in red? It didn't have many upvotes, which was strange because Reddit loves a good mystery. The username was just as unremarkable, user_00467, like someone who hadn't bothered to customize their profile. The post itself wasn't long, but something about it gripped me immediately. I've seen her. You've probably seen her too, even if you don't remember. She shows up when you're alone, when you're vulnerable. She doesn't hurt you, not at first, but she changes things. If you've seen her, you'll know what I mean. Please, if you've had an experience, reply to this thread. I need to know I'm not alone. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. There was something about the way it was written, like a desperate plea. The phrasing felt personal, not like someone spinning a story for karma. Against my better judgment, I scrolled to the comments. There were only a few. This gave me chills. I think I know who you're talking about. You're not alone. She came to me when I was 12. I still can't explain what happened. And then one that hit me like a gut punch. She's not just watching you. She's waiting. I laughed nervously, trying to shake the unease. It was just Reddit, just some weird story. Still, the idea nagged at me. Who was this woman in red? Why did the comments feel more like warnings than discussions? I went back to the main post, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Maybe it was the late hour or the rain making me feel disconnected from reality, but I typed out a response before I could stop myself. I don't remember her, but now I'm curious. What happens when she shows up? I hit send, expecting nothing. Maybe the OP would respond, maybe not. Either way, I figured I'd scroll a bit more before crashing on the couch. But before I could refresh the page, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a reply. The message was from user_00467, but it wasn't what I expected. You've already seen her. Check your photos. I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. Check my photos. What did that even mean? It was a classic Reddit prank, right? Some random person messing with gullible readers. Still, the curiosity was too much to ignore. I swiped over to my photo gallery. At first, everything looked normal. A mix of pictures of my dog, random memes, and a few shots from a camping trip last month. But as I scrolled, something caught my eye. A photo I didn't recognize. It was a blurry shot, taken in my living room, the same living room I was sitting in now. The angle was wrong, like it had been taken from the corner of the ceiling, looking down at me. In the photo, I was sitting on the couch, staring at my phone, completely unaware. And behind me, in the doorway, was a figure. She was barely visible, shrouded in shadows, but the outline was unmistakable. A tall woman, her hair long and wild, and something draped around her shoulders that looked like a red shawl, or maybe a dress. Her head was tilted slightly, as if she were studying me. My stomach dropped. I didn't take this photo. I didn't even know it existed. I checked the timestamp. It was taken less than an hour ago. The rain outside seemed louder now, the steady rhythm turning into something sharper, more insistent. I stood up, my phone clutched tightly in my hand, and turned toward the doorway in the photo. It was empty. Just the dark hallway leading to my bedroom. I told myself to calm down. There had to be an explanation. Maybe it was an old photo, something I'd forgotten about. Maybe I'd downloaded it by accident. But even as I tried to rationalize it, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. My phone buzzed again. Another notification. Another reply from user_00467. You shouldn't have looked. My breath caught in my throat. The screen dimmed for a moment, and then another notification popped up. This time, it was a photo. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the message. Every instinct told me not to open it, but I couldn't stop myself. The image loaded slowly, pixel by pixel. It was dark, but I could make out enough to know what I was looking at. It was my hallway. Taken from the same high angle as the previous photo. The same blurry quality. But this time, the woman was closer. She was standing at the end of the hall, her head still tilted, her face obscured by shadows. The red shawl, or dress, seemed to glow faintly, like it was the only color in an otherwise black and white image. I stared at the photo, my hands trembling. Then I noticed something that made my stomach churn. The timestamp. The photo had been taken just seconds ago. A creak echoed from the hallway, and the hairs on my arms stood on end. The creak echoed through the house, louder than it should have been. It sounded deliberate, like someone was testing the floorboards. I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, my phone trembling in my hand. The rain outside had turned into a torrent, the wind rattling the windows as if the storm itself was trying to warn me. I forced myself to turn toward the hallway, the same one from the photo. It was dark, the kind of darkness that feels alive, like it's waiting for you to step closer. I couldn't see anything unusual, but the photo's image was burned into my brain. She had been there. Somewhere down that hall. Who's there? I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. It cracked anyway. No response. I grabbed the closest thing I could find, a heavy lamp from the side table, and held it like a weapon. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't look at it. I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I took a cautious step toward the hallway, every nerve in my body screaming at me to stop. The creak came again, this time closer. Look, if this is some kind of sick joke, it's not funny. I shouted, my voice echoing back at me. Still, there was no reply, just the sound of the rain and the faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen. I stepped into the hallway. The air felt colder here, heavier, like I was walking into a different world. My phone buzzed again, insistent this time. Reluctantly, I glanced down at the screen. Another photo. This one wasn't blurry. It was sharp, clear, and far too close for comfort. It showed the hallway I was standing in, but the perspective was wrong. It was taken from behind me. In the photo, I was holding the lamp, looking toward the far end of the hall. But behind me, just a few feet away, was her. The woman in red. Her head was tilted sharply, her long, wild hair falling over one shoulder. Her face was partially visible now, pale and expressionless, except for her eyes. Her eyes were pitch black. I dropped the phone, my breath catching in my throat. My body turned instinctively, the lamp raised high, but there was nothing there. Just the empty living room behind me. The tapping started again. It wasn't on the windows this time. It was on the walls, faint but deliberate, moving in a slow, rhythmic pattern. I spun around, trying to pinpoint the source, but it seemed to be everywhere at once. My phone buzzed again, still lying on the floor where I'd dropped it. I hesitated, my gut telling me not to look, but my curiosity, or maybe my fear, got the better of me. I bent down and picked it up. This time, the message wasn't a photo. It was a video. The thumbnail was dark, almost black, but I could make out a faint silhouette. My finger hovered over the play button, my hand trembling. I didn't want to watch it. I knew I shouldn't. But I hit play anyway. The video started with static, the screen flickering as if it had been recorded on an old VHS tape. Slowly, the image came into focus. It was my living room, empty at first, the lamp still missing from the side table. The camera was shaky, like someone was holding it and moving through the house. Then it turned toward the hallway. Toward me. I stumbled back, dropping the phone again as the video continued to play on the cracked screen. The camera moved closer, the faint sound of breathing growing louder. It wasn't my breathing. It was too ragged, too low, like something inhuman was behind the camera. The screen flickered, and suddenly, she was there. The woman in red. She was standing in the hallway, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. The camera zoomed in on her face, her black eyes staring directly at me through the screen. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. The static grew louder, drowning out everything else, and then the video cut to black. The tapping stopped. For a moment, the silence was absolute. No rain, no creaks, no hum of the fridge. Just silence. Then I felt it. A presence. She was behind me. I didn't have to turn around to know it. The air was cold, suffocating, and I could feel her staring at the back of my head. My body refused to move, paralyzed by the overwhelming sense of dread. Finally, I forced myself to turn. The lamp slipped from my grip and clattered to the floor. She was there, standing in the middle of the hallway, her head tilted even further now, as if it might snap. Her red dress seemed to shimmer in the dim light, the fabric moving as if it were alive. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then she smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was too wide, too sharp, stretching across her face like it didn't belong. And then she spoke, her voice soft and hollow, echoing in my ears. "You called me." The lights flickered, and she lunged. The last thing I remember was the sound of my own scream, echoing into the void as the world around me went dark. When I woke up, it was morning. The rain had stopped, and sunlight streamed through the windows. The house was eerily quiet, but nothing seemed out of place. The lamp was back on the side table, the hallway empty. I picked up my phone, dreading what I might find. The thread was gone. My comments, the photos, the video, everything had been wiped. It was like it had never existed. But as I sat there, trying to convince myself it was all a dream, I noticed something. On the screen, faint but unmistakable, was a single new notification. "See you soon." I'm not the type to scare easily. I've been a Reddit junkie for years, and I've read just about every creepy story you can find on r/nosleep and r/glitch_in_the_matrix. It's all entertainment, right? Just people spinning spooky yarns to keep us awake at night. At least, that's what I thought. It was a Thursday night, and I couldn't sleep. The rain outside was relentless, hammering against the windows like it was trying to get inside. My dog, Max, was curled up at my feet, snoring softly, and I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through Reddit on my phone. I'd been hopping between subs when I came across a post that stopped me cold. It wasn't flashy, didn't have a clickbait title, just a simple thread sitting at 0 upvotes. "Do not search your name." The username was just a random string of letters and numbers, and there were no comments. The lack of engagement made it feel off, like something people had purposely avoided. But curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on it. If you value your life, do not search your name on the site. This isn't a joke. This isn't a game. It's a warning. Once you see it, there's no undoing it. I'm already too late, but maybe you're not. Don't make the same mistake. It was short, cryptic, and weirdly intense. I sat there for a moment, debating whether to back out or engage. It was probably a troll post, but something about it felt different. Against my better judgment, I typed a reply. "What happens if I search my name?" I hit send and stared at the screen, half expecting an immediate response. But nothing happened. After a few minutes, I shrugged and went back to scrolling. I chalked it up to another Reddit user trying to spook people and almost forgot about it. Until I got the notification. It was a private message from the same user who'd posted the thread. The subject line was blank, and the message was just a link. No explanation, no context. Just a plain URL, shortened and nondescript. I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the screen. Every rational part of my brain told me to ignore it, delete the message, and move on. But I couldn't. It was like the link was daring me, taunting me. Before I could second-guess myself, I clicked it. The link took me to a page that looked like an older version of Reddit, clunky layout, dated font, all black and white. The header read, Archive Profiles. There was a search bar in the center of the screen, with a single instruction beneath it, enter your name. I laughed nervously. It had to be a prank, right? Maybe it was one of those personalized creepypastas where they pull public info from your profile to freak you out. Harmless, really. I typed my name and hit enter. The screen went black for a moment, then refreshed. My full name appeared at the top, along with a list of entries. The first one was a thread titled, Seen at the Window. The timestamp was from 6 months ago. Confused, I clicked on it. The post was short. Saw him tonight. Standing by the window, looking out into the street. He didn't notice me, but I saw him. I always see him. I felt a chill run down my spine. The username wasn't familiar, but the description, it sounded exactly like my house. I live on a quiet street, and my living room window overlooks the road. I had a habit of standing there late at night, just watching the empty streetlights flicker. I scrolled back to the archive page. There were more entries. The second one was titled, The Thing in the Reflection. The timestamp was only a week old. My throat tightened as I clicked on it. The post was just as brief as the first. He didn't see it. But I did. It was behind him, staring through the glass. It knows he can't see it yet. My heart was pounding now. I glanced at the window, half expecting to see something standing there. The rain had fogged up the glass, and the room felt colder than it should have. Max lifted his head, his ears perking up like he'd heard something, and I froze. The next entry in the archive had today's date. The one who searched. I didn't want to click it, but I couldn't stop myself. My finger hovered over the link, trembling, before I tapped it. The post was different this time. Longer. More detailed. He found the thread. He clicked the link. Now he knows it's real. He'll hear it first, the faint tapping on the glass. Then it will come inside. There's no stopping it. He searched, and now it knows. As soon as I finished reading, I heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping, coming from the living room window. My breath caught in my throat, and I turned my head slowly, my heart pounding. The window was fogged over, but I could just make out the shape of a hand pressed against the glass. The tapping stopped. Max started growling, low and deep, his eyes fixed on the window. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking as I opened the Reddit app again, desperate to close the page. But the app wouldn't load. The screen stayed black, and a single line of text appeared. It's too late. The lights flickered, and the tapping started again, louder this time, coming from multiple windows. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, like it was coming from every direction. I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Max was at my feet, his growl turning into frantic barking. He faced the windows, his fur bristling, as if he could see something I couldn't. Stop it. I yelled, though I wasn't sure who, or what, I was yelling at. The tapping stopped. The sudden silence was deafening. The only sound was the rain hammering against the house, and even that felt distant, muted. I grabbed Max by the collar and pulled him close, my other hand gripping my phone like it was a lifeline. The screen was still black, the words, "It's too late," staring back at me. Then the lights went out. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The darkness was absolute, the kind that makes you feel like you're drowning in it. I reached for the flashlight app on my phone, but before I could turn it on, I heard something. A soft creak. It wasn't the sound of the house settling. It was deliberate, like someone, or something, was walking across the floor. The sound was faint but close, too close. Max let out a low whimper, pressing himself against my leg. I held my breath, straining to listen. Another creak. This time, it was coming from the hallway. My phone buzzed in my hand, the vibration startling me so badly I nearly dropped it. The screen lit up, showing a new notification. It was from the same Reddit thread, the one I couldn't close. It's inside now. I swallowed hard, my fingers shaking as I swiped the notification away. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs felt like lead. The hallway stretched out in front of me, pitch black, the kind of darkness that seemed to swallow light. Max started growling again, his eyes fixed on the hallway. I tightened my grip on his collar, my mind racing. I needed to get out of the house, but the front door was past the hallway. I couldn't bring myself to move. Every instinct screamed at me to stay where I was. Then I saw it. At first, I thought it was my eyes playing tricks on me. A faint glow, barely visible, at the end of the hallway. It was red, pulsing softly, like the ember of a dying fire. The glow grew brighter, and then I realized it wasn't just a light. It was a figure. Tall and thin, its outline barely distinguishable in the darkness. The glow came from its chest, a faint, unnatural red that seemed to pulse in time with the tapping I'd heard earlier. Its head tilted to one side, and I could just make out its face, or what should have been a face. Instead, there was nothing but smooth, featureless skin. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over Max. The figure didn't move, but the glow grew brighter, casting long shadows across the walls. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Don't look away. I froze, my eyes locked on the figure. It didn't move, but the air in the room felt heavier, like it was pressing down on me. My chest tightened, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Max barked once, loud and sharp, but the figure didn't react. I don't know how long I stood there, staring. Seconds. Minutes. Time felt meaningless. Then, slowly, the figure raised a hand. Its fingers were impossibly long, tapering to sharp points that glinted in the faint red glow. It pointed at me, and though it didn't have a mouth, I heard it speak. Its voice wasn't a voice at all. It was a feeling, a vibration in my chest that made my stomach churn. The words were clear, though. You called me. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just ran. I bolted for the back door, dragging Max with me. My bare feet slipped on the hardwood, and I slammed into the doorframe, nearly losing my balance. I fumbled with the lock, my hands shaking, and threw the door open. The rain hit me like a wall, cold and relentless, but I didn't stop. I ran into the backyard, the mud sucking at my feet, and turned to look back. The house was dark, the windows lifeless. But the hallway was glowing, that faint red light spilling out into the night. The figure was standing in the doorway, its hand still raised, pointing at me. I stumbled back, pulling Max with me, and ran toward the fence. I climbed over it, landing hard on the other side, and kept running. The rain blurred everything, and I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to get away. Eventually, I reached the road. The streetlights were flickering, casting strange shadows across the pavement. I turned back to look at my house, but it was gone. Not just the figure, the entire house. The lot was empty, like it had never been there at all. My phone buzzed in my hand. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. The notification was from Reddit, another message from the thread that shouldn't have existed. You can't run. You can't hide. The tapping started again, this time coming from inside the phone.